Thank you. So my name is Julia Barbu-Vlachopoulos, and together with my colleagues Damien Cocard and Philippe Dai, who are we are the call coordination team for the AMIF 2023 call. The agenda that we will follow here today is the same that has been published on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. We will start with a brief introductory information about the AMIF 2023 call. Then we will discuss the legal, financial, and administrative aspects of your application. And then our colleagues from the policy units will give you a brief description of the policy aspects of each topic. We will have a short break from 10:45 to 11. So an important disclaimer regarding the info session today. The call for proposal has 6 topics, and in this info session, the topic coordinators will cover different elements of each topic text, but without necessarily referring to all its elements. This should not be interpreted as if those elements were considered of lesser or no importance, as the official call text is the only legally binding source of information, and this information in the call text is the one that we will use to evaluate your proposal. I would like to make a short comment that is not necessarily related to the current call, but we have already received several questions in this respect. So, as it has been pointed out, there are 8 priorities in the field of integration that are established in the AMIF thematic facility for the period 2023-2025. But only 5 integration topics have been included in this call. This is because although the thematic facility is a multi-annual instrument, our budget remains an annual exercise, meaning that we do not yet have the budget to cover the entire period. But the 3 priorities that have not been included in this call, namely access to healthcare, improving digital skills among migrants, and support measures for the integration of migrant women, will be published in a separate call that for the time being we estimate will take place in Q3, Q4 2024. The AMIF 2023 call is a follow-up of the 2019 and 2020 AMIF call for proposals, and you can find on the F-top a list of successful projects that have been awarded in these 2 calls. What do we expect from the current call? We expect to have innovative proposals that build on previous or existing projects in the domain of integration and protection of children, but without duplicating existing projects and with wider geographical coverage. This is why we strongly encourage you to go and see and read about the projects that have been awarded in 2019 and 2020, not only to have a general idea about the type of projects and consortia that have been awarded, but also because it is very important that your projects do not replicate what has already been funded in the past. So, as you might know, this call is the first integration call under the new MFF. We have a new generation of funds and we have new templates. We have several modifications both to the model grant agreement and to the application form. And here today we will discuss 2 of these most significant changes, namely the use of unit cost for travel, subsistence, and accommodation, and the use of AMIF key performance indicators. But there are also other changes that have been introduced. So we strongly advise you, even if you are familiar with our documents from the previous MFF, to read carefully the new documents. So further considerations applicable to all the topics of the call. So where applicable, the proposals should demonstrate how they will effectively build on the relevant previous or ongoing EU-funded projects, including but not limited to projects funded by the AMIF 2014-2020. You could decide to refer to projects that are being funded under other EU funds, like the Horizon 2020 strand that deals with migration, or for topic 3, with previous Erasmus Plus projects. So this is up to you. Proposals should foresee a sound communication, dissemination, and visibility strategy for the contents of a project, outputs and outcomes, and where applicable, the use of European website of integration to make the results known, because of course we do a lot of nice things, but it's also important that we create enough awareness in our community of stakeholders about them, so that the results that your projects would achieve can be visible to other interested parties, and thus ensuring sustainability. Proposals should be submitted by a consortium that includes relevant key partners such as national public authorities, local and regional authorities, economic and social partners, civil society organizations, migrant organizations, and other local diaspora community or organization. Of course, this is a general comment. Under each topic, you will find more precise information about the type of actors that are considered relevant for the respective topic. Projects should comply with EU policy interests and priorities such as environment, social security, industrial and trade policy. Here there is already a reference made in the introductory part of a call where we refer to efforts of reducing the carbon footprint, and we encourage you to include in your proposals also the use of online meetings or hybrid meetings, and to use travel for specific events where face-to-face meetings would bring added value. Now, one of the novelties introduced by the new multi-annual financial framework is the fact that now in the AMIF regulation, we have something that we call the Funds Performance and Monitoring Framework, and it applies to projects that are funded under direct management too. This means that all the projects that will be awarded under this call will need to contribute to the performance and monitoring framework of AMIF by providing data according to a set of output and results indicators. The full list of indicators is available in Annex 8 of the AMIF regulation. And although the data collection will only take place at the final report stage, so for awarded projects at the end of a project, we encourage you to familiarize yourselves with the reporting indicators from the beginning in order to include the relevant ones in your monitoring strategy. And at the final report stage, projects will be asked to confirm on their honor that data on all Annex 8 indicators relevant to the action has been duly submitted to the Commission. Therefore, it is extremely important that from the very beginning you have an understanding of the indicators on which you will want to report, and also you will have an understanding of level of this, how should I put it, the different elements that need to be reported. For example, if you look for the number of trainings provided, it is not sufficient to report on how many persons attended the training, but also on the gender of a person, on the split per age group, and it's quite detailed. Further considerations applicable to all the topics of this call. Applications should comply with all relevant ethical principles and all applicable international, EU, and national law on ethical issues. Applications should pay appropriate attention to the effects of a project on individual rights and freedom and indicate the measures taken to limit or remedy such effects. And the application shall respect and shall be implemented in line with the rights and principles enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And as mentioned before, unit costs will be applied for travel and subsistence in line with the Commission decision number 35 from 2021. Now, I will guide you through the legal, administrative, and financial aspects of your application. We will start with a general overview of the AMIF 2023 call for proposals. We will discuss the eligibility and admissibility criteria and provide some clarifications, and then the evaluation process. And then my colleague Damien will present some guidance for drafting your application and some additional clarification on the questions and FAQs. So the general timeline of the call is the one announced in the call text document. The call opened on the 17th of January and it will close on the 16th of May at 17:00. Today we have an info session for potential applicants, and the evaluation period will start as soon as the deadline for submission has been reached, and we estimate it will last until November. I would like to clarify that although we aimed to keep the evaluation at the same pace for all topics, we cannot fully exclude that if one topic is a particularly large number of proposals, whereas other topics might have less, that we will decide to have different timelines. I'm mentioning this because I know some of you belong to organizations that will apply under different topics. So please, if you receive a reply for one topic and you haven't received for another topic, bear in mind that this does not constitute a problem or does not mean that there is a problem with your application. It might simply mean that the all topics do not respect the exact same timeline. Of course, we recommend that you avoid late submission due to potential problems in the system. It is always possible to submit an application, and then if you want to do changes, to submit a new one and withdraw the previous one. There is also a deadline 7 days prior to the deadline for submission, from which we will not be answering questions. So if you have questions, please make sure that you submit them in due time. One element to consider is the starting date of the action. So normally we recommend that the starting date of the action is aligned with what would be a realistic date for the signature of a grant agreement. So your project should aim to start somewhere in December 2023 or January 2024. And of course, around 1 year from now, we aim to have a kickoff meeting for the selected projects where we discuss more in detail the implementation part. As mentioned, the AMIF 2023 call has six topics. Proposals submitted under the present call must address one of the following topics: promoting community sponsorship schemes and integration of persons in need of protection, integration and inclusion at regional and local level, support to integration in education of migrant children and young adults, multi-stakeholder initiatives for migrant integration into the labor market, promoting complementary pathways linked to work, and transnational actions to support member states in the field of protection of children in migrations. Applications must clearly address one of these topics. There is a possibility to apply for more than one of the topics, and there is a possibility to submit more than one application, but for different projects. So you cannot submit the same project multiple times. But your organization could be part of two different consortia that submit two different projects. The available budget for the call is 40 million euro, and then there is specific budget information per topic that has been published in the call text document. As always, the European Commission reserves the right not to distribute all the funds available or to reallocate some amounts between the topics. Now, with regard to admissibility, applications must be sent no later than the deadline for submitting application. I would like to clarify that we do not have any leverage with regard to the applications received late. So even if your application is 1 minute late or 30 seconds late, the system will mark it as having arrived after the deadline, and there is no way to change that. So please do your best to submit in advance, and take into account that in the last hour, it is very likely that multiple organizations will try to submit in the same time, and that this can lead to the application working with some delay. The proposals must be submitted using the electronic submission system on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. We do not accept any applications sent by post or by email or any other form. You must submit your application using the standard submission form, Part A and Part B of the respective call for proposals. You are not allowed to customize a Part B. You have to keep all the foreseen sections, even if they are not relevant for your proposal. And you are not allowed to delete instructions or change the font. You must include all the mandatory information, and if applicable, you must annex audit report. There is one mandatory annex, which is the list of previous projects, and I would like to clarify that this is a condition for admissibility. So even if your consortium does not have, or any of your participants has never participated in an EU-funded project, you still need to upload a document stating this, that you do, none of the members of your consortium has ever participated in an EU-funded project. This is a mandatory annex, and not uploading it will lead to your proposals being declared inadmissible. The proposals must be drafted in one of the EU official languages. English is the preferred one in order to speed up the evaluation process, as it is much more likely that the evaluators will speak English. But of course, every time we also have proposals received in French or Spanish, so this is perfectly allowed. As mentioned, failure to comply with any of these requirements will lead to the inadmissibility of the application. Now, with regard to eligibility, there are two aspects to consider. First of all, the eligibility of the applicants and of the co-applicants, and also the eligibility of the application itself, so the consortium composition. There are also eligibility requirements regarding the action's durations, the transnational component, and the value of the EU requested contribution. Here, we have to make a very important comment. You might have seen, those of you that have already started your application, and I see that there are quite a lot. In the system, you will all, irrespective of a topic for which you apply, you will see this disclaimer that you need to have a minimum of 3 entities from 3 different member states. I would like to clarify that this is this disclaimer, it's at call level, because we couldn't go and set specific requirements at topic level. However, this does not mean that if you belong to one of the topics where in the call text document it's specifically mentioned that you need to have 5 entities from 5 member states, it is the call text document that takes precedence and not the disclaimer in the funding and tender portal. The settings in the submission systems have been set at call level, so they are the minimum overall, the 6 topics, but they might not be exactly the ones for your topic. So please always refer to the eligibility overview table that exists in the call text document. And the same disclaimer as for admissibility, failure to comply with any of the eligibility requirements will lead to the ineligibility of the application. One thing to remember about both admissibility and eligibility is that these are yes and no criteria. So on our side, we do not have any, there is no subjective assessment of your proposal. It's really a yes or no, and failure to comply to have a yes on all the requirements leads to the ineligibility of a proposal. So in terms of legal status of the applicants and co-applicants under each topic, there is, this is like I mentioned in the section 6 of a call document, in the eligibility requirements and in the eligibility overview table. So non-profit entities can be coordinators and beneficiaries under all topics. For-profit entities can be beneficiaries, but they cannot be coordinators, and also they cannot participate under topic 6 related to protection of children. International organizations can apply under all topics as beneficiary, but they can only be coordinators under topic 1, 5, and 6. Natural persons are not eligible under any of the topics. Now, when it comes to the country of establishment and the transnational component of the consortium, so all applicants and co-applicants must be established either in the EU member states, including overseas territories, overseas countries and territories, but excluding Denmark. There is no limitation in terms of country of establishment for international organization, but as mentioned in the call text, The country of establishment of an international organization does not count for the minimum number of member states represented by the consortium. Beneficiaries from countries with ongoing association agreements, negotiations may participate in the call and can sign grants if the negotiations are concluded before grant signature. We have received a lot of questions about whether or not an organization from Mexico or India or the UK can apply. Please note that there is already a published FAQ that states that currently there is no third country that has that has been associated or that is in negotiation to become an associated country under AMIF, which means that currently only entities established in the EU member states and international organizations are eligible. Proposals must be submitted by the minimum number of applicants or beneficiaries representing the minimum number of different eligible countries as mentioned in the eligibility overview table. Again, please make sure that you follow the information in the eligibility overview table and not the disclaimer in the submission system. In the submission system, irrespective of the topic, they will tell you that you will receive a message that your consortium must be formed out of 3 entities from 3 different member states, whereas, for example, for topic 2 and 3, you must have minimum 5 entities from 5 different member states. This is the call text is the information against which your proposal will be evaluated and not the disclaimer in the submission system. When it comes to project duration, the maximum project duration for all topics 1 to 5 is 36 months, whereas for topic 6 is limited to 24 months. Extensions are possible afterwards during the implementation of a project if duly justified. At this moment in time for the submission, your proposal must stick to this current maximum project duration that has been established in the call text. Your proposal will be declared ineligible if your project is scheduled to run for a longer period, or if you submit a project for which activities have already started before the date of submission. At the level of each topic, there is a minimum and a maximum EU contribution that has been established in the call text. For topics 1 to 5, this ranges from 1 to 2 million euros, whereas for topic 6 is from 750,000 euros to 1 million euros. Please note that the minimum and maximum refer to the requested EU contribution and not to the total budget of the action. What does this mean? It means that if the total value of your project is slightly above 1 million, once you apply the 90% funding rate, it might be that the EU contribution that you are requesting falls slightly below 1 million, in which case your proposal will not be eligible. So please, when you establish this, when you establish the amount, bear in mind that this is the EU contribution and not the total budget of the action. Of course, if your application has lower or higher EU requested contribution, it will be declared ineligible. Now, moving on to the evaluation process, we would like to, again, to make a disclaimer to state that the presentation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or professional advice. In particular, this information is without prejudice to any future decision of the evaluation committee on actual proposals, and the European Commission shall not be liable for any use made thereof. So first of all, we will have an evaluation committee that will assess all the applications. There will be a preliminary check. So your proposal will be first checked for the formal requirements that we have already discussed, admissibility and eligibility. And then we will, proposals that have been deemed both admissible and eligible will pass to the technical evaluations. This is a two-step evaluation procedure. First, we will assess the relevance of your proposals, and only proposals that pass the threshold for relevance will be evaluated further. All proposals will be informed about the evaluation result, and successful proposals will be invited for grant preparation. The other ones will be put on the reserve list or rejected. So, compared to the previous MFF, where we had 5 evaluation criteria, now we only have 3. The relevance has been maintained with the same minimum pass score, meaning that your proposal needs to score at least 21 points in order to be evaluated further. And then we will evaluate quality and impact of your proposals, and overall your proposal must reach at least a score of 70 out of 100 in order to be considered for funding. When it comes to relevance, clarity, there are several elements. There are 3 questions in the form that you need to fill in the part B. Clarity and consistency of the objectives and scope of a project against the objectives and expected impact outcomes. The relevant EU strategic documents and/or action plans, which are normally detailed under each topic and that you need to take into account. Previous results in the field, and this again links to previous funded projects, and to the European transnational dimension. Of course, relevance is key. Please do your best to draft a proposal that is fully in line with the priorities of a call. It could be that you have submitted an excellent proposal, but if it's not answering to one of the topics of a call, it will be deemed irrelevant and we will not evaluate it further. Step 2 is quality. Here it's important to make a comment because under the previous MFF, we had 5 different criteria, including relevance, and the different elements of a proposal were evaluated as standalone. So we were looking at how well you assess risks, how well is your communication strategy defined. Now, several elements have been brought together under these 2 criteria, quality and impact. And we have a more global approach of evaluation, meaning that we do not assess only in the separate elements, but also the links between them. Of course, in order for your proposal to score high for quality, there must be logical links between the identified problems, the needs, and the solution proposed. There must be an appropriate methodology proposed for the implementation. And here, of course, several elements: concept, methodology, timetable, monitoring, and evaluation. It is important to have a good consortium with that is both relevant and that has expertise in the domain of the topic. To have good management structures and procedure, to have a good identification of the risks and a good risk management strategy, and also the feasibility of a project within the proposed time frame and the cost effectiveness and best value for money. On the topic of best value for money, again, we would like to make the comment that the lowest value project is not necessarily the one that provides best value for money. So the cost of a project is always evaluated in relation to the results and the outcomes that can be expected from the project. So the simple fact that you strive to go for the lowest amount possible is not a guarantee that your project will receive a good score for this particular criteria. When it comes to impact, the same comment should be made that the different elements are now considered together, meaning that if you do not have an appropriate communication strategy, this will also make the sustainability and the long-term impact of your project less credible. So you have to address each of these elements, but also to take into account that you must have appropriate links between them. So the impact is assessed based on the expected short-term and long-term impact of results on target group, the degree of ambition and innovation of your project, the appropriate communication strategy, including visibility of EU funding, appropriate dissemination strategy for ensuring sustainability and long-term impact, and sustainability of results after EU funding ends, and also to what extent the results that your project hopes to achieve can then be replicated or have further potential for use. I think this concludes our part about the evaluation, and I pass the floor to Damien so that he can continue with guidance for drafting.
Hello, Damien Coquart speaking. I'm the colleague of Philippe and Julia, and I will guide through the end of this presentation. So be patient and attentive. This is almost done, and then you will have the possibility to hear from the policy background. So I would like to guide you, to give you some guidance for drafting your application. The two elements which are on your screen at the moment are very important. First of all, make sure you have the necessary information to prepare your proposal. Indeed, you need to have all the elements in line with also the admissibility and eligibility of the proposal. Then where you start, you first read through all the relevant documents of the call. This is the basic. You need to read the call text and all the elements which are on the call text, including the facts, because the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, are also a source of information to fine-tune your proposal. And the questions you have to ask beforehand, because these are the questions the evaluators will also ask themselves, is the proposal as the proposal understood the topic? Am I in the right topic? Have I chosen the right topic? Is my proposal in line with the topic content? So do I reply to the question raised by the topic? Is my partnership strong enough? I mean, I need to have a certain number of partners to implement the activity. So think about it. And of course, this is part of your methodology. And last but not least, do I have a European transnational dimension? This is very important. Don't forget that you are under a call under union action, meaning that one of the key elements is the European transnational dimension. So you have all these elements, and these elements notably will be in fact translated into the award criteria. So this is really important that you have them in mind to be able to, let's say, get the maximum points to the award criteria. And also, so this is more on the, let's say, on the content part, but on the more formal part, then it goes without saying what I'm going to say, but it's really important to repeat it, because we see each time these kind of problems appearing ever and ever. First of all, be explicit. Proposals are evaluated as they are. So we will not look for additional information outside what is written in the proposal. So if this is not clear, then you may have a problem. Make them read by someone else, I don't know, so that you have a kind of other view on it. Be explicit. Take your time, but do not wait until the last minute. You never know with the submission what can happen with all this IT congestion or whatever. So be aware of the deadlines. This is really important, and do not submit at the very last moment. You can submit and resubmit your proposal several times. So the advice is at least to submit before the deadline, largely enough before the deadline. You need also to regularly check and read again the proposal, because the more you fine-tune the proposal, it needs to be still consistent with the objective of the call. So this is really important. And of course, proofreading. is one of the key elements. And don't forget the budget table, of course, because this is really important. And as I said already, save it often. This is possible. Can we move to the next slide? So your application must be submitted online via the Funding and Tender Portal electronic submission system. This is the only way to submit your proposal, and you have the links everywhere here in the proposal. But before doing so, you need to register in the participant register and get a PIC number if not done yet. So this is, if you don't have a PIC number, please start to get it. Then you need to fill in and submit your application. And in your application, you have two parts. First of all, you have a part A, which is the administrative information on the applicant and the budget. It means that it describes your address, the departments, and also the budget. And there is what we call part B, which is the technical content of the proposal. And this is made out of Word document and the template is available on the page, on the submission system on the page of the call. So as said before by Julia, you shouldn't modify this template, just apply. Don't forget you have a 50-page limit. This is important. Once you have done your Word document, then you upload it as a PDF on the system. And of course, don't forget the annexes, including the list of projects you have done. Upload them again as a PDF file, not as a Word, not as an Excel, as a PDF. On the registration and legal status, um, the safe assessment of the legal status is the basis for the eligibility check of the application. So you need to identify your legal status very clearly yourself. Make sure that you select the right type, because if you are not, then you may fall under the ineligibility criteria. We remind you that natural persons are ineligible, and this registration will be controlled by the European Commission in the grant agreement preparation phase. Next. And then last but not least, of course, the useful resources, the call document, the basic. You need to consult and read all the elements, not only the text, but also all the annexes and all the documentation which is annexed to this call. If you find, you will find all the answers in the call, but also on the online manual, how to apply, on the FAQs, on the frequently asked questions, either on the topic page or on the portal, directly on the portal for general questions. Make use of these resources. Eligibility of costs. The grant parameters, in fact, for example, maximum grant amount, funding rate, total eligible cost, etc., are fixed in the grant agreement in a place called datasheet. The grant will be a budget-based mixed actual cost grant, meaning that we will reimburse eligible costs and costs which are actually incurred for your project and not the budgeted costs. So the costs you may budget will not be reimbursed unless they are eligible and actually incurred, except for these categories of costs covered by unit costs. For equipment, in particular, full cost is not eligible, only depreciation. And the cost for financial support to third parties is not allowed in this call. And last but not least, travel, accommodation, and subsistence costs are reimbursed on the basis of unit costs with the same funding rate of 90%. You will have more information and in the decisions which was on the screen. On the unit cost, the use of units cost is a simplified cost-based form of funding. Basically, the cost equals the number of units multiplied by a rate, which is defined in the decision. The unit costs are used to cover the most frequent cases of travel and accommodation. And when unit costs are available, their use is mandatory, meaning that we will not reimburse the travel costs in any other form, like real costs, in line with the eligibility criteria. If not described in the decision, then actual costs apply to reimburse the travel costs. Next, please. Indeed, you will have examples of here. So the decision described travels intra-member states, between member states, and all travels above 400 kilometers. And the same for accommodation and subsistence. Only the most frequent destinations are listed, 56 countries out of 193 in the world. So when there is nothing told in the decision, then actual cost apply. Unit cost on other expenditures. So this is a reminder for you. For travel, subsistence, and accommodation costs, no auxiliary costs related to the mission can be reimbursed. No public transport, no taxi, no restaurant meals, coffee on the go, etc. They are covered by the daily subsistence allowance. And all this is a package which represent a unit cost. So not related to the real cost of the mission. Unit costs have to be taken as a fixed package, regardless of the actual expenses of the mission. And the Commission decision that provides for unit costs will be updated. But for the moment, the decision, we have no information on the date of this revision. So in case of severe impact that crisis is having on the travel industry, Commission will undertake a review of the travel costs. Next, please. Co-financing. Again, the cost will be reimbursed at a funding rate fixed in the grant agreement, which is 90%. The source of co-financing, the ineligible sources of co-financing are considered as ineligible costs. In-kind costs are ineligible costs, and when you split the cost of the action, it is up to the applicant to define the estimated budget of the action, including the distribution between partners, and applicants are free to determine the distribution of the 10% co-financing amongst them and or other sources. So you have here a quite wide range of flexibility. Similarly, it's up to the applicant, meaning you, to define the requested EU contribution for each partner while respecting the total amount, which cannot go up beyond 90% of the total eligible cost of the action. Next, please. Financial capacity and audit report. Then the financial capacity assessment is only made during the grant agreement preparation, meaning once your proposal have passed the evaluation and have been selected. The financial capacity check will be carried out on the basis of the documents uploaded in the participant register during the grant preparation. This is why it's important that you register with a PIC. The analysis will be based on neutral financial indicators, but also taking other aspects, dependency on EU funding, deficits and revenues in previous years, etc., etc. The reporting and payment arrangements are fixed in the grant agreement in the section called datasheet. For more information, so you can have a look at the model grant agreement, which is available on the page of the call, but also on rules for the legal entity validation, LEAR appointment, and financial capacity assessment. All this will be explained. And for the submission, submit to the right topic, please. We need coherence between part A and part B, but please choose the right topic from the beginning. Submit again ahead of the deadline. You never know. It's better to submit beforehand than never. Save a copy of your application. It goes without saying, but better said. Check the warning message. Of course, some of the warning message in red will make you are blocking message, but in yellow you can still pass. But it's important to check the warning messages as it may have an impact on eligibility. But eligibility criteria take precedence over these warnings. And remember, it's a competitive call, so only very good applications are selected for funding. Next, please. If you have questions, or you can always go to the portal submission system and contact the IT help desk. For non-IT related questions, then please use the functional mailbox, which is displayed here. home-amif-union-actions plural at ec.europa.eu for non-IT related questions. For all IT related, please contact the IT help desk on the portal submission system. And non-IT related questions, meaning sent to the functional mailbox, should clearly indicate the topics they refer to. Please use the topic ID. And if you have questions, you can also consult the FAQs, the frequently asked questions. All questions received by the European Commission, which are relevant to the call, cannot be easily answered by consulting the call text, and does not constitute a pre-proposal check, will be published as an FAQ on the Funding and Tender portal. You have the link throughout the documents, so you will be all able to access it. Next, please. This is how it looks like. This is the FAQs portal, and then you can ask, you can search for questions. And to finish, what type of questions will be addressed by the EC? Questions that aim to get clarification on the topic texts. For example, under AMIF, under the call, how many objectives are to be addressed in call number 1? This is a clarification. Then also questions that are related to administration, legal or financial aspect of the call. For example, under this call, is it possible to apply as an affiliated entity for a private entity? But, next please, we will not address the following type of questions. Questions on eligibility of applicants or activities or on the outcome of the call. This we will not address. We will not address as well questions on particular applications regarding relevance, proposed outcomes, suitability of the consortium, or any other element falling under the evaluation criteria, which could be considered as a pre-proposal check. So the EC will not make pre-proposal checks. For example, would our proposed consortium suitable for this topic, or is our ID in the scope, etc. You will have some examples of questions on the screen. You will have time to consult them afterwards. Next, please. Et voilà. We have now finished our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck with your applications. Julia, Philippe, and myself are really pleased to have you on this channel. And now I give back the phone to Julia.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now we will continue with the presentations from the topic coordinators. We start with topic 1, promoting community sponsorship schemes and integration of persons in need of international protection. So I think we can pass the floor to Sarah.
Thank you, Julia, and good morning, everyone. My name is Sara Bertoletti. I'm a policy assistant in the unit for DG Home C2, working on legal pathways and integration. And today I will present topic 1 under this call, promoting community sponsorship schemes and integration of persons in need of international protection. I will start by providing a few information for your background, trying to explore why this topic is important. Promoting community sponsorship schemes and the integration of persons in need of international protection is high in the Commission's agenda. In its 2020 recommendation on legal pathways to protection, the Commission encouraged member states to explore and expand community sponsorship schemes as a way to underpin resettlement, humanitarian admission, and other complementary pathways. Promoting community sponsorship is also envisaged in the Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion. Actions within the Action Plan aim to support the development of community sponsorship programs across the EU through funding, facilitation of exchange of best practices, and strengthen cooperation between all relevant public and private stakeholders. As you may know, for the time being, there is no commonly agreed definition of the concept of community sponsorship in the EU. However, several member states are already implementing different models of community sponsorship, and EU funding was provided to promoting community sponsorship under previous calls. Despite the differences at national level, all community sponsorship schemes are based on a strong partnership between different actors involving the state, civil society organizations, and private individuals. In community sponsorship schemes, non-state actors, so individuals, NGOs, faith-based organizations, play a structural role in welcoming and integrating those in need of international protection. So, why it is relevant to promote community sponsorship models? On the one hand, community sponsorship schemes can help member states to increase the number of admission places, addressing key challenges that might hinder the effective upscaling of existing programs, such as reception needs. On the other, sponsor groups can support the newcomers regarding housing, but also other activities such as language trainings, administrative steps, and more importantly, psychological and emotional support, access to services such as education, employment, and healthcare. This might also have positive spillover effects, not only on the beneficiaries, but also on local communities too. Just to conclude the background, most recently from February 2022 onwards, we have seen an amazing show of solidarity. Many people in Europe have opened their private homes to host and support those fleeing the war in Ukraine. The Commission collected best practices and considerations in the Safe Home Guidance and noted that community sponsorship models have inspired stakeholders who have rapidly responded to the massive displacement of those fleeing the war in Ukraine. Such experiences could also inform the design and implementation of sustainable and resilient accommodation schemes in the future. So, going to the next slide, please. The general objective of topic 1 is to increase the impact and the sustainability of community sponsorship schemes as regard, on the one hand, the number of persons in need of international protection covered and the effectiveness of their integration path, but also enhance the qualities of such programs. There are different ways, still on the previous slide. Thanks. There are different ways to achieve this general objective. For example, developing community sponsorship activities that focus on housing solutions, expanding the number of member states that operate community sponsorship schemes and scale up the existing programs, expanding the network of sponsors engaged and motivate and ensure their commitment, because indeed the sponsors are at the core of these programs, but also promoting a higher diversity of sponsors. Good practices and relevant experiences, as I mentioned, have been developed both in the EU, but also in other international partner countries such as Australia, Canada, the UK, and the US. And I invite you all to give a look at those experiences to get inspirations. Next slide, please. In line with the general objective and the specific objectives that I just mentioned, there are a number of activities that could contribute to achieve the desired outcome. Of course, this is just by way of example, and as previously mentioned by my colleagues, please refer to the call for a more complete overview. So, activities could focus on developing the complementarity between the reception capacity of member states and the housing offer provided through community sponsorship, information and awareness raising campaigns for possible sponsors with a view to strengthen the support at local and national level to the development of such programs, but also activities related to the selection and recruitment of sponsors, including vetting procedures, the involvement of diaspora communities, matching support activities and training, building up of partnerships, and setting up of new pilot projects. As mentioned in the slides, these activities can be complemented by the development or the improvement of common tools, such as quantitative and qualitative indicators or guidelines to better assess the integration trajectory outcomes of beneficiaries of community sponsorship schemes. Of course, such activities should take into consideration the wealth of existing materials developed through other projects. Next slide, please. As additional considerations, we welcome proposals with broad geographical scope, engaging applicants from diverse regions across the EU, and proposal involving applicants from more member states than the minimum number identified in the call, as long as these are relevant for the design of the action. Applicants are recommended to involve relevant national, regional, and local authorities, also the proposal preparation stage, and refer to the results of this consultation process in their proposals. And lastly, applicants are recommended to involve people in need of international protection in the design of these proposals and the implementation and evaluation of the program. So thank you very much. We included here a few links so that might be useful in the preparation of your applications. And thank you again.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now we will move to a presentation of topic 2, integration and inclusion at regional and local level, and I pass the floor to our colleague Angeliki.
Thank you, Ilya. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Angeliki Petric. I'm from the integration, the legal pathways and integration unit, dealing with integration and specifically with relations with local and regional authorities. So this topic I'm going to present, it's about integration and inclusion at regional and local level. This is a very important topic for us. It is one of the horizontal actions in the action plan on integration and inclusion. We are very conscious that integration, very often it's managed centrally by the member states, but it happens locally. You don't integrate into a state, you integrate into a village, into a neighborhood. So this is why we consider the role of local regional authorities as crucial for integration of migrants. And also in the previous call, we had a similar topic about integration at the local and regional level. On the other hand, we are very conscious that there are different layers of competence in the member states. There are member states with with regional competences, very strong, very important regional competence in terms of integration. The other member states where the regions and cities and municipalities don't have much competence, so they rely a lot on the central government for that. So we're conscious of that, of course, and it's something. Integration, it's a national competence. It's something we cannot help, but once we can support local and regional authorities in their role, because we think this role is so important. Coordination in this context is extremely crucial. So we have to improve coordination between the various levels through locally focused strategies and plans. A comprehensive and integrated approach is the only effective way to go, because everybody has to be on board. It's not enough to have only local and regional authorities. We have to have local communities, we have to have NGOs, we have to have the central government. So this is the only way to achieve integration. We have one important forum which is very innovative. It's called the Urban Agenda for migrants, inclusion of migrants and refugees. And it's innovative because it is a multi-level governance platform between cities, national governments, EU institutions, where all sit together and exchange good practices, how to achieve better integration. And we are going to relaunch, this has been relaunched, I'm going to relaunch the Urban Academy, where local and regional authorities can learn from each other, again, about how to achieve better integration. So next slide, please. So these were some elements about the background. So what are the objectives? Sorry, is the previous one? Background and then objectives. Sorry, this is. There is a problem with the order there. Can we go to the objective? Okay, the objective is not there. Anyway, I'm going to say that that's after the background. So what is the main objective? Is to increase the impact and the sustainability of all this cooperation. We have to develop and implement the local integration strategies. And we have to implement them, but at the same time, to increase the effectiveness of the migrants' inclusion at regional and local level. This is the general objective. And at the same time, we'd like to promote the design of concrete good practices and their dissemination, because it's not enough to develop and implement a very successful local integration strategy if this is not disseminated, if this is cannot be used by other member states, by other stakeholders. So this is a very, very important element, and it's something you have to keep in mind when designing, when applying for a program, because it's not enough. I mean, think that you do a good thing, but the others have to see it and have to replicate it, because this is what we call sustainability, and this is one of the very important issues. So some example of the actions now. This is a non-exhaustive list of the actions. So I would like to design an example to design and implement a local integration strategy to speed up to access of services. So services can be access to health, can be access to education, access to accommodation, help with finding employment. So local authorities can be very active, to help migrants access the services. Other examples, providing various forms of training, can be language training. This is a very important element, because language is an impediment for access to any service very often. Can be vocational training, can be workshops, can be mutual learning activities, can be good practices on specific actions. Volunteering is another example. We've seen how efficient it can be when you have local communities who volunteer who create these budding schemes with migrants. So they can help migrants with concrete objectives. They can help them with studying. They can help them learn the language, find employment, access local services, and of course create links. And these links can be very effective and can go beyond the help, on this specific issue. So this is something we really value. Another example, to train cultural mediators or interpreters. We've seen that very often. We organized a workshop on health recently, and we saw how important it is to have proper trained interpreters who can mediate, for instance, in mental health, and not only mental health. That's just an example. And we had some successful projects in the previous call for that. So this is something which sometimes is misregarded, because we consider you have somebody speaking the language can be an efficient mediator of an interpreter. It's not often the case. We need proper training for these people. So this is an example as well. To create know-how and best practices on integration with concrete objectives that can be upscaled and disseminated through specific activities. It's another example. And the creation of rural partnerships. Sometimes it's migrants very often they concentrate on, they don't concentrate on rural areas, they concentrate on urban areas because there are more services in urban areas. But we've seen examples where migrants in rural areas can very well accommodate it, where these rural areas can be revived, where villages were half abandoned, for instance, and you have migrants arriving, and then you have local schools opening, you have local hospitals opening. So there are some examples there where you have a win-win situation, where migrants have better services in the end because there are better accommodation options, for instance, and again, it helps revive local communities and create better links between the two communities. So we've seen examples like that. So it's something we encourage. So next slide, please. So outcomes. Some outcomes, what we like to see at the projects, at the end of the project, we'd like to see faster inclusion of migrants, more effective and with less administrative burden. We know, of course, that integration is a very long process. So faster, of course, we are conscious, cannot be done in a day or a month or even a year. I mean, sometimes inclusion takes generations to happen. But we'd like, of course, to speed up this process. We'd like to see improved engagement and participation of migrants involved in the project at the local level. It's so important. We cannot decide about what is good for migrants without migrants being part of it. At the Commission, we have now the expert group on the views of migrants, and we consult them on policy. You know, we consulted them for the action plan, for instance, and this is a very important issue. So we encourage you to involve local communities, diaspora communities, migrant-led organizations in the participation. We'd like to see scalable and replicable good practices. Again, sustainability, this is a key word, and a methodology for the development and implementation of local integration initiatives and strategies that can inspire other people across the EU, other partners across the EU. We would like your results, your outcomes to get, you know, to be used elsewhere as well. And we'd like, when possible, also to take into account migrants with specific needs. For instance, beneficiaries or applicants of international or temporary protection have specific needs. Migrant women have specific needs in terms, for instance, of finding employment. We have migrants who can have a disability or a characteristic that they are subject of discrimination. For instance, if they belong to an LGBTQI community, there are all these characteristics that can create discrimination should be taken into account. Next. So improved cross-border cooperation between authorities and other stakeholders involved. That's also very important, because this is what, again, I come back to this sustainability issue. We would like that cooperation between member states and different stakeholders is more is present and it's developed. We'd like improved cooperation between national and local authorities. I said at the beginning, we need to be, everybody has to be on board in order to have a successful integration. So even if integration strategies are designed centrally, and sometimes funds are central and are distributed from the central to the local authorities, we need to have this better cooperation between the two. This is crucial. And we have to have an enhanced visibility of the views and opinions of migrants associations and migrants at national, regional, and local level. I think I have explained that before. So next slide, please. So some issues which we consider very relevant. It's the design of concrete good practices and their dissemination through transnational cooperation between relevant stakeholders. I think it's, again, the same issue of concrete good practices with specific outcomes and dissemination. So this is one of the things we will look into the projects. It was said before, projects are very competitive. We have many applicants, sometimes we have very good projects. So what will make the difference is to have a coherent approach of outcomes, of practices, outcomes, and dissemination. Proposals with broad geographical scope, engaging applicants from diverse regions of the EU, and in particular proposals with the rural areas I mentioned, because we don't have enough being done in the rural areas. This is why we'd like to support actions in rural areas. And again, with migrants inclusion, about migrants inclusion, and it can be also links between urban and rural areas. You know, it's not only rural areas, of course. Proposals with applicants from more member states than the minimum number identified in the eligibility criteria is also an important issue. For instance, in this topic 5, there should be minimum 5 applicants from 5 different member states. But if we have applicants from more member states, I mean, if we have equally good projects and there are applicants from more member states, of course, that are relevant. It's not just to put applicants to put, you know, in order to with a cosmetic role, they have to have a specific role in the project. Of course, this is very relevant for us. And the coordinators cannot be profit-making entities and cannot be international organizations in this specific point. And the further considerations, applicants should clearly demonstrate how all proposed activities will help achieve the specific objects. Again, you have to be very coherent. The development and implementation of the related activities should be based on a comprehensive approach through effective consultation and cooperation with relevant stakeholders that should provide their views. So it has to be a comprehensive stakeholders approach, and you have to show how the stakeholders provide their views and how their views are taken into account through the whole process of the project, from the design to the implementation and the dissemination, because they all have to be on all these levels. And all proposed consortia should directly involve local and regional authorities. And of course, we would welcome to see also as leaders, local and regional authorities, not only, you know, of course, as applicants and as co-applicants, as well as key partners relevant for the achievement of the objectives, such as migrants, diaspora communities, civil society organizations, economic and social partners, and etc. So I've included in the references, you see some important documents there. So I invite you to have a look. And as Damien said, I think the questions will be answered in writing at the end. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you good luck. And I hope that we'll get, I'm sure we'll get as good projects as we get at the last call in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angeliki. This concludes the first part of the info session. Now we will take a short 10 minutes break, so we will resume at 11:05. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I hope you're all back from your coffee break. This is Vincent Cato speaking. I work as well, like my previous colleague, in the integration policy team. And I will present a few aspects of the topic 3 on support to integration in education of migrant children and young adults. Next slide, please. I will give you a few background aspects to give you a brief description of this topic. Of course, the challenge is certainly very well known to you. We have, for example, highlighted in the action plan on integration and inclusion the gap that exists between migrant children and national children, local children, where, for example, in terms of dropping out of school. So in terms of education, migrants' education, we know there are still challenges to face and to address, and those challenges have long-lasting effect in terms of reproducing inequalities or sometimes discrimination that migrants face when they cannot have an effective access to education, or they don't manage to succeed as much as other children in schools. So this is why we chose to have this priority. This is the first time that we have such a priority focused on education in the MIF on transnational project. We of course had priorities on related to children, but that was more focused, for example, on unaccompanied minors related issues. It's been a long time we wanted to have this priority, and unfortunately the international context with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the arrivals of many children from Ukraine reinforced the need to reflect on good practices to support migrant children integration in education. In this topic, we focused on language learning. This is quite important because this is not a completely general topic, even if you will see that the scope allows you to propose different type of activities, but this is not in general about education. There is a focus on language learning. The choice of this focus is I would say also rather obvious, because we know that language is one of the key. I mean, lacking the knowledge of the local national language is a key obstacle for integration. It's very relevant for children in terms of the specific needs they face to learn the language in the school environment. And we also wanted to underline the fact that if many things that mastering the language is about succeeding in school, we also wanted to underline the fact that this is also the language is at the core of the integration, as we also perceive integration as allowing the exchange between migrant communities and host communities, and language being one of the bridges and one of the tools to have more inclusive society where migrant children can find their place. So this is the reason for this focus. We wanted to underline as well the importance of transnational actions because they can allow and enable us to learn from the diversities of ideas and practices in this field, given that local and national context influence a lot the way national and local language are taught and the way they are used in school or school-related environment towards migrant children. There's a strong aspect, strong reference to informal and non-formal education, in the sense that it's important to have activities outside the school, so outside the formal education, so activities that relate to language learning outside formal education, because we know that non-informal or non-formal education activities, for example, sport-related activities, culture-related activities, are a tool or mean that can be very effective in terms of inclusion, but also specifically for language learning. The last point you see here, the complementary, it's also to highlight the fact that if the AMIF deals, the Asylum Migration Integration Fund deals with migration related aspect, there are of course other funding instruments that relate specifically on education, and that can be then targeting children, including migrant children. So this is quite important for you to know when you're reflecting on your proposal, to know also that other project might have been funded on related aspects, so that you can feed your reflection when drafting your proposal. Yes, sorry, just one last point before the, yeah, on the background. I mentioned here at the second point, all category of migrants. This is one important aspect because the idea here is that we cover all profiles of migration. This is not a call which is related only for refugee children, so beneficiaries of international protection. They're of course included, and as I mentioned, the international context and the arrivals of Ukrainian children, we know this is an important issue for many member states and many school systems to welcome refugees, given the numbers, but this is relevant for all because we know the needs are there for all migrants, irrelevant of their reasons for migration or the reason of the migration of their family, because it's the specific needs for on language learning are for all children, even if you might need to adapt sometimes for even more specifically for refugees. Objective. There, so as I mentioned, the focus on language learning, so more effective language learning for migrant children, the aspect of involving a large scope of stakeholders, local one, schools, the NGOs, local and regional authorities, and also migrant-led organization. The idea is to provide adapted and balanced language reception introduction classes. So typically when the first step of language learning for children that just arrived, creating an inclusive school culture and maintaining and building on language and migrant learners spoken at home. This is also quite important for us in the sense of this, I would say the reference we often made to the two-way process and to the inclusive society. Here we talk about the fact that learning a language integrating is not just about learning the new language and forgetting your own skills, your own identity. This is very much about using everything you know, everything you are to bring something to the host society. And we also know that experience have shown that using the skills of the children, reading at home in their own languages with their parents is also good pathways for any school success, which means also learning the new language. I already mentioned the inclusion in non-formal and informal education as one effective tool. Then next slide, please. Yes, here I wanted to mention, maybe already make the link with the better inclusion of migrant parents, because I think that's also related to the point I mentioned on the language spoken at home. So this is focus on children and language learning of children, but to do that, you can and often should also involve migrant families. So the migrant parents, this is about building trust and allowing parents to feel welcome in schools and then find their place and to be able to support effectively their children. So that's quite an important point for us. The other points are about training of staffs on language learning and intercultural communication courses. There is a strong reference to budding, coaching, and mentoring systems. We know this is also a very effective tool, often to be able to develop the skills of the children, to have this equal equal system, like for example between children or between older children and younger children. And we have seen that in previous calls as well. I encourage you to have a look at as project. For example, I think there was in 2019 a priority on social orientation of newly arrived migrants through involvement in local communities, including mentoring and volunteering activities. And there you have a set of projects, and quite a few of them worked on those aspects of budding systems. So that could be also a source of reflection for you. The rest I already mentioned briefly, but just to say that partnership, of course, this is a key concept for us. And here we have the one that I just mentioned, the local and regional authorities, especially in member states where you have a strong role of the local authorities in terms of managing the schools, NGOs, migrant communities. These are very important stakeholders in general integration. And for that topic, we encourage projects to reflect on how they can, of course, involve schools, universities, especially when universities are providing training to teachers, and other specific teacher training authorities in place. Next slide, please. So example of activities, again, of course, non-exhaustive. So the local support is, I just mentioned, in terms of for the action to be very effective. Conference and workshop to develop relevant methodology and exchange of good practices. I encourage you to have a look, for example, at the Spring project from the Horizon 2020, which reflects on also the what is a good practices and the replicability of project. That's a good basis to reflect on sustainability of your project. Pilot project and upscaling activities. This is here also a good way to support sometimes the development, the further development of good ideas that might be implemented only in one member state, but that could be implemented in more member states through your innovative approach. Next slide, please. I already mentioned the buddy system, and just to say that here, the buddy system or the mentoring coaching activities, they don't need to be on just learning the language, because also we know that just having this buddy system is a language learning tool sometimes. So this is about inclusion, but it doesn't need to be a buddy system just to learn the language. This is one of the usual effect of a buddy system, is to encourage the dialogue in the national language for migrants. Dissemination, this is rather obvious. Here, just to mention on training, it's to underline the diversity of situation. There is the obvious reference to activities about teaching to migrants who don't master completely the language. That's for teachers, but you need to take into account the diversities both of the local situation of the schools and of the migrants. You have different needs of the migrants, as you know, depending on the age, depending on their academic level when they arrive. Some in some situations, some might have been outside school for quite some time. Some might just have arrived, have a very high level, but they don't master the language. Some might be teenagers, some might be younger children. So it's also interesting for us to work on this diversity of situation to provide a kind of a relevant toolbox through the project selected. The diaspora aspect is also very important. This is a horizontal element in our call, but this is also quite important for us to, as I mentioned, the role of parents and understanding how education system works for migrants. Next slide, please. So peer-to-peer learning between organizations, that's to mention the fact that yes, schools might feel isolated sometimes, facing such a big challenge especially when you have a bigger number of arrival of migrant children, and this is quite interesting for us to work on this peer-to-peer aspect. We know that school learn well from other schools, so that's what we wanted to underline here. The migrant involvement I already mentioned several times. Maybe to mention something about the target group. I already mentioned the aspect that it's not just about refugees, but it's about all migrants, even if refugees are especially relevant here. I just wanted to mention here early childhood education and care, which is also a bit sometimes forgotten in terms of activities. So this call can cover all stages, so from a very early stage, very young children to teenager finishing high school. And I already mentioned that it's also interesting to work on this partnership with also specific actors related to education. Thank you. And I think the last slide is about references. Yes, so the action plan. Here I just mentioned there are of course more references, but these are the key ones. I really invite you to have a look at the document on inclusion of displaced children from Ukraine, which is a good entry point on education inclusion in a very specific context, but still quite valid in many aspects. And this is based on previous experience. And the OECD making integration work on young people with migrant parents is also a very good overview. Don't forget to check on the European website on integration, FC, where you can find good practices on education, but also on the other aspect of the other priorities of the call. And this might be useful for you to work on your consortium in case you find relevant partners. If you can, this is also relevant to know if you should contact national program, the authorities in charge of the AMIF national program to see if they have something there, because there could be a good complementarity to explore. And then the Creative Europe and Erasmus Plus are the colleagues from the Commission working on education and culture. These are the funding instruments, so also relevant for you to check. Thank you very much, and good luck with your application.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Now we will move on to topic 4, and I pass the floor to Ursula.
Hi everyone, my name is Ursula Hönig and I also work in the integration team in DG Home, and I would like to present to you the 4th topic in this call for proposals, which is called multi-stakeholder initiatives for migrant integration into the labor market. So the reason why we have chosen to include this topic in the call is because together with education, employment is another key priority sector in the action plan on integration and inclusion. And in fact, finding work early on in the integration trajectory is about as important as getting work at the right level of one's skills and qualifications. But often there is a conflict between these two objectives, which happens when migrants who arrive just take up the first job that they find, which may not be the right one in terms of putting their skills into use, because many arrive, in fact, with skills and qualifications which would be very much needed on the EU labor market, but they find various difficulties for having these skills valued and for applying them. So in fact, the statistics show that foreign citizens are much more likely to be overqualified than EU citizens for the work they do. And women are even more likely than men to be overqualified, especially in the case of migrants. So this often leads to a situation where skills fade away or depreciate over time, and potential is unused, which is bad for the people concerned, but on a larger scale from an economic point of view as well, in light of the serious shortages that we observe on the EU labor market presently. And the reasons for this have to do, on the one hand, with problems to get skills and qualifications properly validated or formally recognized, but many other obstacles too. For example, difficulties to access relevant information about rights and opportunities, accessing networks, and of course, situations are very individual and specific people have specific needs. Groups such as, for example, women with young children, they have certain accompanying needs like access to childcare for being able to take up work. And there is also, of course, migrants in vulnerable situations where things are even more complicated. In an important basic consideration is that for effectively including people in the labor market, we need the active cooperation of many of the actors involved, such as public authorities, and at various levels, from the local to the national, as well as social and economic partners, very importantly, of course, employers themselves, and also the civil society, including migrant organizations themselves. And so at the European level, the Commission has been working with the European social and economic partners since 2017, or even a bit earlier, in the partnership, the European Partnership for Integration, to create opportunities for refugees and other migrants on the European labor market. And last December, this partnership has reaffirmed its commitment in a joint statement, which gives you a bit of additional background, and you will have the reference at the end. So this by way of background. Now coming to the objectives, we would hope that the projects under this call will contribute to strengthening this multi-stakeholder cooperation that I just mentioned, by creating new partnerships, but by also reinforcing existing ones, and at the transnational level. That is one thing. The other objective would be to focus on this dimension of both early integration, but also integration at the right level of one's skills and abilities. And it would be interesting to build on tools that are available that actually have been developed by the Commission, if possible. So this would be one interesting objective. One of the tools that we have in mind here is the new talent partnership pilot, which the Commission launched last October together with the European Labour Authority, and which is specifically directed towards displaced people from Ukraine. So it's supposed to facilitate their integration in the labour market. In fact, displaced people from Ukraine are able to create profiles, CVs, on the EURES network, which is the network of the European Employment Services, and to access vacancies that are published there. And in the case of some member states, the employment services actually also manually can match the people with the vacancies. So this is a new pilot project. We also have other tools that we have developed and that we promote. For example, the skills profile tool for third country nationals, which is an online tool developed by DG Employment. There is tools for creating CVs like the Europass with European standards, etc. These are all geared towards achieving a better matching between skills and qualifications of the migrants, and on the other hand, the demand on the labor market. So developing these further would be an important objective. And then another side is also we would like to see how best to build more inclusive workplaces. So projects could contribute to raising awareness about discrimination, conscious, subconscious bias. They could elaborate good practice on how to tackle discrimination and promoting diversity. And all this would eventually promote more sustainable employment conditions for refugees and migrants. And then moving to the next slide, please, some examples of what proposals could include innovative approaches, as was mentioned at the beginning, as well as upscaling good practices that are already known and established. We'd be interested in seeing the development of and provision as well of training to stakeholders, and by that we mean both the migrants on the one hand, but also, for example, smaller companies, and in terms of capacity building. For the migrants, one interesting training would be bridging courses, and by that we mean courses that complement education that people have acquired abroad. And then, of course, conferences, workshops, dissemination, awareness raising. I wanted to also mention previous calls for proposals from which you could draw some inspiration. For example, in 2017, we had a call which was called Integration of Third Country Nationals into the Labor Market, which aimed at mobilizing employers and social economic partners. There were relevant projects under this call, as well as the topic called Local and Regional Networks for Integration in 2018. And in 2019, there was a topic under the call which focused on the integration of migrant women, but in fact, it had several projects with a strong labor market focus. Just by way of further background for some inspiration. Now, the outcomes that would hope to see is obviously strengthening the networks between the labor market actors, as mentioned, better tools and testing them to validate skills and qualifications and to match these skills with vacancies, then good practices that contribute to more inclusive workplaces and sustainable employment conditions, training methods, as I mentioned before, and of course, the dissemination of all this to relevant stakeholders. Regarding the target group, on the next slide, please. These are all the actors that I referred to before. So social partners, meaning employers as well as trade union organizations at various geographic levels. So from the European down to the local and regional level, also the national level, and be it sectoral, with a sectoral focus, or cutting across industries are welcome to be part of proposed consortia. Economic partners, meaning chambers of commerce or chambers of industry and skilled crafts. In terms of public authorities, employment services, then vocational education and training providers, also other public authorities that have responsibility for labor market integration, and this is quite specific, authorities perhaps that are responsible for the recognition of qualifications. Then we always encourage the involvement of migrant organizations and other civil society that are active in the labor market integration area, perhaps foundations that have relevant experience, and last but really not least, companies as, of course, key actors in this endeavor. Then a couple of further considerations. So we are open to, you know, reflections and actions on the integration of all migrants, but a focus on people in need of international protection would be particularly encouraged. And we would also encourage you to take into account specific needs of certain groups, such as migrant women or specific groups of vulnerable migrants, as we have seen that, you know, individualized approaches in this topic as well as others usually work best. Then also in this topic, we encourage to involve more member states than the minimum number, if possible and relevant, and the minimum number here would be 3. And as I said before, to involve migrant-led organizations as well in the consortium, and or also as beneficiaries. And of course, if you could please show how the proposed activities would help achieve the objectives. And finally, I have also included a couple of additional references regarding the tools and initiatives that I have mentioned before, such as the Talent Pool Pilot, the European Partnership for Integration. Also in June last year, the Commission came out with a guidance document aimed at member states and other stakeholders to provide examples of you know, practices and good initiatives to draw on for helping the integration or the access of displaced people from Ukraine to the labor market. And I would also like to mention a new publication that the Commission has supported, which was elaborated by the OECD and will be out soon, on introduction measures for newly arrived migrants, which also has some interesting considerations on the labor market area. I hope this was useful in complementing the information in the call, and I would also like to wish you good luck for your applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ursula. We will now pass to the 5th topic, promoting complementary pathways linked to work, and I pass the floor to Sarah.
Morning, everyone. I will now present topic 5 of the call for proposals, the title, Promoting Complementary Pathways Linked to Work. So I will start with a few information for your background. As you know, the number of refugees in need of resettlement or other solutions is on the rise. However, global opportunities for resettlement remain overall limited. At the international level, the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants of 2016 and the Global Compact for Refugees of 2018 called for expanding legal pathways for refugees so that these can become systemic and globally available. Building on that, the most recent UNHCR 3-year strategy of 2019 on resettlement and complementary pathways has set ambitious goals to develop complementary pathways that are additional to resettlement. As well as the EU level, the EU is committed to promoting safe and legal pathways for the protection of those in need. In its 2020 recommendation, the Commission encouraged member states, as we've seen before, to promote complementary pathways for people in need of international protection. pathways that should remain additional to robust resettlement humanitarian mission schemes. Refugees have skills and motivation to thrive, but often lack the opportunity to do so in countries of first asylum. Complementary pathways leverage existing legal channels of admission, such as labor mobility schemes, and make these accessible to people in need of protection, taking in due consideration their specific needs. Refugees, for example, might have issues with the travel documents or with the certification of their skills and qualifications. So such elements need to be taken in consideration when designing specific programs. To promote complementary pathways, EU funding was already made available under the 2020 AMIF action call for Union Actions call for proposals, but the topic is gaining renewed momentum. Last November, at the high-level forum on legal pathways to protection convened by Commissioner Johansson, the topic was discussed among EU ministers and other international partners. And at the forum, there was agreement that this is time to move to more concrete action and make complementary pathways linked to work a reality in the EU. Hence, this topic under the call for proposals. Moreover, as previously mentioned in the previous topic, complementary pathways linked to work could also be particularly relevant to address labor shortages in the member states, while at the same time harnessing the skills and talents of those in need of international protection. Therefore, a win-win situation. The general objective, so next slide, please, of topic 5 is to increase the impact and the sustainability of complementary labor pathways as regards, on the one hand, the number of legal admission places, and on the other, the quality of the programs. There are different ways to achieve this general objective, for example, by creating new pathways or scaling up existing programs to increase the number of admissions and people involved, by scaling up existing programs, expanding the number of member states implementing such programs, but also increasing the number of businesses willing to engage. Lastly, by establishing the necessary procedures and support structures to provide for a level playing field and address the challenges that I mentioned before that persons with a refugee background might face. Which activities could support the envisaged specific and general objectives? We have several examples. For example, to design programs that lead to concrete admissions, project will need to engage with and strengthen the cooperation between relevant authorities, labor market actors at local, regional, national levels, but also trade unions, local communities, diaspora communities, and international organizations and NGOs. The involvement of this wide range of actors as partners in the consortium should be also favored. In order to ensure the feasibility of the proposals, applicants should involve relevant national authorities such as Ministry of Interior or Ministries of Labor and Employment during the preparation stage, and refer to the results of this consultation process accordingly in the proposals. Also, direct engagement would be particularly favored. Engaging with the relevant actors and stakeholders with a view to fill information gaps and provide trainings to promote and concretely design complementary labor pathways programs could be one of the activities, as well as designing capacity building activities, awareness raising campaigns, outreach strategy that could target businesses, including SMEs, both in rural and urban areas. Other activities could involve, for example, test the quality matching tools to link job offers and refugee talents. With these activities, project will contribute to promote complementary pathways, engage with key stakeholders, and strengthen the support at local and national level for the development of such labor pathways. Further consideration in the preparation of your application are that the European Commission welcomes proposal with broad geographical scope, engaging applicants from diverse regions across the EU, The European Commission also welcomes proposal involving applicants from more member states than the minimum number identified in the eligibility criteria, as long as these are relevant for the design of the action. In the last slide, I included a few documents for your reference. The highlighting is by mistakes. So I included the Commission recommendation on legal pathways, the press release that followed the discussion at ministerial level, and the high level forum on legal pathways to protection. But also you could find inspiration looking at two of the projects that were previously funded, and they are looking specifically at complementary labor pathways, and these are the Displaced Talent for Europe and the EU Passport project. So I wish you best of luck for your applications, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We now move to the last topic in our call for proposal for protection of children in migration, and I pass the floor to Isabella.
Good morning, everybody. I will first like to welcome you to this presentation and to say a few words about myself. I am based in the Asylum unit of DG Home, but I am also the focal point of contact on the protection of migrant children in DG Home, which means that I am going to be your point of entry if you want to ever approach anybody from DG Home on issues that have to do with the protection of children in migration. And I'm here to present to you this topic, why we have chosen it, what we want from it, and which are basically the conditions of eligibility, if you like, for proposals that you may be interested to propose on this area. The topic of protection of children in migration is very important because it is one of our political priorities at the level of the European Union, not only for the European Commission, but also for all the institutions involved. It is a subject that has become very topical lately, as you probably very well know, being stakeholders in this area. On the one hand, in the last year, we saw the migration crisis with its specific characteristics that has been generated by the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, which, as many of you know, has led to arrivals of millions of refugees from Ukraine to the European Union who are seeking here temporary protection. Roughly half of the people who have arrived fleeing from war in Ukraine are children, and some of them are in a particularly vulnerable situation. They have specific characteristics and different needs, perhaps, than the ones of the classic migrant children arriving from other parts of Europe. But there is no need to go now into detail on how we are going to address those issues. Suffice to say that providing guardianship for those who arrive without a legal representative and support to the Ukrainian guardians who are coming along with the children is one of the priority lines of work that we have at the moment. On the other hand, in the last year, we have also witnessed an increase in the number of arrivals of migrant children from other areas of the world besides Ukraine. And in particular, an increase in the number of arrivals of unaccompanied and separated migrant children, to the point where we are almost at levels that we were observing in 2017. Part of them are asylum applicants, so they benefit from certain legal guarantees in the EU. But then there are a lot of children who are arriving irregularly and are not eligible for asylum. Our policy is to offer the same level of protection to everybody, irrespective of their migration status. And this is why, including in the area of financing of proposals such as the current call, we are giving particular attention to addressing the needs of all migrant children, whether they are from Ukraine, from other areas of the world, whether they are asylum applicants or not. So it is equally important. And we would like to see this non-discriminatory approach reflected in the proposals that we are going to receive. Now, in the call for proposals, you have specific references to the policy and legal background, if you like. So you have very explicit references to a number of legal instruments from the area of asylum and return, but also to the basic framework which guides our policy in this area, which remains the 2017 communication on the protection of children in migration, which is a document that I'm convinced that many of you are aware of. There are a lot of relevant elements in the Pact on Migration and Asylum. Then there is an emphasis that is given to the protection of migrant children and to issues related to strengthening guardianship, in particular in the EU strategy on the rights of the child, which is a all-encompassing strategy which refers to all children, European and non-European ones, on a non-discriminatory basis again. And last but not least, the 2021 EU Child Guarantee, which is an instrument that we are using in order to determine member states to have specific actions and strategies for dealing with poverty and social exclusion, including for children from a migration background, which obviously is going to constitute a particular challenge in this respect. Next slide, please. We have chosen for this call to focus on guardianship. Why? For two specific reasons. First of all, guardianship is, if you like, essential in order to give access to these children to all the rights that they have, starting from shelter, from assistance, from psychosocial support, access to the all kind of rights that they have and derive from our legal and policy framework. To all these, the figure of the guardian is crucial. Without effective guardianship, you do not have effective access to any of the remaining guarantees to which the migrant children are entitled. Having considered this crucial or pivotal role of the guardian in the whole system, there is no wonder that both the 2017 communication and the 2021 strategy on the rights of the child are giving particular attention to this particular subject. Next slide, please. Now, the objective of this particular call is to receive projects which demonstrate to us that they can support exchange of good practices and sharing of knowledge with respect to the good functioning and support that is needed, including external support, if you like, for making guardianship work. Like I mentioned before, guardianship systems in the member states do not function, let's say, in a void. There is a need for all sorts of external support. This is a subject that has been explored already at the level of the European Commission. So, for example, we had an expert group meeting last year in February, whose minutes and proceedings are available online, if you like, for your inspiration to take let's say, inspiration for the wording in your proposals. You need to search on the Google with the words Home Informal Expert Group on Children in Migration. You will fall very easily upon the link to the publications that we have about the work of this expert group. And the last meeting we had last year was precisely on external support to guardians, so it is relevant for the topic. Now, next slide, please. What kind of actions are we expecting? When we are talking about proposals, concrete proposals of actions, it's important to underline from the very beginning that one thing that we cannot do is cover the costs of hiring additional guardians or their operational support. So, for example, the kind of expenses that current guardians incur in order to deliver their function vis-a-vis the migrant children. These are things that we are not intending to finance under this call. Here, basically, we are intending to facilitate facilitate the financing of actions which are geared to achieve our primary objective, which is the one that I mentioned before. So exchange of knowledge and of best practices. How can this be done? It is usually done via conferences, study visits from one country to another, exchange programs, the developing of training modules, which can be used in the future in similar situations as well. So it's not a one-off use. The developing of practical support concept modules that can be applied. I can give you a concrete example. So, for example, in Italy, there are good examples of developing networks of the private individuals who are functioning as voluntary guardians. And these networks are facilitating the work of the individual guardians a lot, and they are facilitating their interaction and leverage, if you like, vis-a-vis the public authority. So this is one of the concepts which is innovative in terms of supporting the work of the actual work of the guardian. It's just an example. Of course, there are many others. And then again, all sorts of training and all sorts of support that can be given to the guardians in terms of acquiring new knowledge, learning about how things are done in other jurisdictions. Yes, I mean, it is what I wanted to clarify is that the list of actions is not exclusive. So you can think of other ways and other types of actions that can be proposed as long as they serve the purpose that I defined before, which is exchange of good information about good practices and of knowledge about how things are done on the ground. Next slide, please. What kind of outcomes we propose. Of course, I mean, the outcome, the primary outcome is basically an improvement in terms of the knowledge and information that the beneficiaries have. But you will find in the call explanations on the fact that we expect from your proposals to be explicit in terms of the methodologies that will be used and the metrics, if you like, indicators, to measure the outcomes of the program, and there is a whole list of different kind of indicators that can be used here. Again, it's not exclusive in the call. You can think of other ones, but basically the idea is that we would like to see in the proposal a clear explanation of how you are planning to measure the output of the project. Next slide, please. There is also in the call a list of all the reference documents which are pertinent in this. Some of them are in the descriptive part, some of them are a little bit further down in the description. Please take them into account in the formulation of your proposals. And I think that it is particularly important to make references to the 2017 communication and to the strategy on the rights of the child. Next slide, please. Okay, here we're coming to a little bit of practical information. So the total budget that is available for this priority is of 6 million. And there are limits for each individual proposal. So it can be between 750,000 to a maximum of 1 million per project. The duration should be of maximum 30 months. And for creating the consortium, we expect to have at least 5 applicants from at least 5 member states. No profit-making entities, but international organizations instead can participate, be it as a coordinator or a partner. Now, I do not need to draw conclusions on this, but you can easily understand that when you have budgets of oscillating between 750 million to 1 million, we can have with this overall total budget probably something between 6 to 8 or 9 successful proposals at the end of the call. It has been important for us, by difference to previous calls on the protection of migrant children, to increase the number of participants and the coverage of the member states to benefit from this. When we are talking about, in this context, the fact that the partners need to be from 5 different member states, it's not only let's say, where the partners are headquartered, but we're talking evidently about the scope of the project. So minimum 5 member states need to be covered. It is always a good practice to try to see that there is a good geographical balance between the partners. I think this is always something that we are going to evaluate when we evaluate the proposals, that there is, for example, a good mix of countries that are frontline, but also transit and destination countries. Always having among those 5 countries, some of those who are subject to particularly high migratory pressure is always welcome, of course. And these are a little bit, if you like, more or less the general lines on that account. Next slide, please. Okay, so we arrived to the end of this presentation, and if you do have specific questions to raise, maybe I can be of assistance now. If not, my colleagues and will intermediate, and we can reply at a later stage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I would like to start with correction, and thank you, Isabella, for including in your presentation the maximum duration for projects under topic 6, because on slide 20 we had mistakenly mentioned that for topic 6 the maximum duration is 24 months. So I would like to clarify that the maximum duration is stated in the call text document, and as mentioned by Isabella, 30 months for topic 6. As mentioned in the beginning, we will not be taking questions today. But if you believe that any further clarifications are needed, please do not hesitate to send us your questions at the functional email address home@AMIF-Union-Actions. We will do our best to upload the recording tomorrow or before the end of the week. Thank you very much for joining us today and listening in. And once again, good luck with your applications. Thank you very much.